I was 30 minutes into my quarterly presentation when Douglas Pritchard stormed to the front of the conference room and yanked the projector cable from my laptop. 12 executives stared as he announced, "That's enough. Let someone competent talk." My marketing strategy could have saved this struggling tech company millions. I had the data right there showing a 32% increase in customer engagement. But none of that mattered to him. The room fell completely silent. Every single person was looking at me, waiting to see if I would cry or argue or just disappear. I did none of those things. I stepped aside calmly, pulled out my phone, and opened the email I had glanced at 20 minutes earlier during my presentation. It was from TechVance Solutions, one of the biggest competitors in our industry. They were offering me the position of Vice President of Digital Strategy. The salary line made my heart race even as Douglas continued his tirade behind me. $900,000 annually, plus stock options, and a signing bonus that would cover a down payment on a house. My fingers moved quickly across the screen. I typed my response right there in front of everyone. "I accept your offer. When can I start?" I looked up at Douglas with the calmest smile I could manage. Perfect timing. "I'll take the position for $900,000. His face turned the color of a fire engine. The vein in his forehead that only appeared when he was truly furious started throbbing. He sputtered something about company loyalty and breach of contract, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to regain control of the situation. The executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. A few looked impressed. Most just looked confused about what was happening. Douglas tried to pull himself together, straightening his tie and clearing his throat. "Your non-compete clause prevents you from leaving," he said, his voice dripping with false authority. "You signed a contract, Gail." I had been waiting for this. I'd consulted with an employment attorney named Ruth Feldman just last week when TechVance first reached out. She'd reviewed my contract thoroughly. "My non-compete is only 6 months, Douglas, and it specifically doesn't cover vice president-level positions at competitor companies." Ruth made sure I understood exactly what I signed 3 years ago. The color drained from his face slightly, then rushed back even darker. He wasn't done yet. "Fine. Clear out your desk. Right now. Security will escort you out." "That works for me," I said. "I'll start at TechVance in 2 weeks." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, even though my hands were shaking. I'd been preparing for this moment ever since Douglas started taking credit for my ideas 6 months ago. Ever since he began undermining me in meetings and making comments about my appearance instead of my work, I knew he wanted me gone, but I was going to leave on my terms. Or so I thought. I went to my office and started packing my belongings into the cardboard box I kept under my desk. 3 years of work, of late nights and weekend projects, of building relationships with clients and mentoring my team. I opened my laptop to back up my final files before returning it to IT. The screen was blank. I pressed the power button. Nothing. I tried the reset sequence. Still nothing. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I grabbed my external backup drive from my desk drawer and plugged it into my personal laptop. The drive opened, but every folder was empty. Corrupted files. Unreadable data. My cloud storage account wouldn't let me log in. Password incorrect. I tried 3 more times. Account locked. That's when I saw Brenda, Douglas's assistant, walking past my office. She glanced in, and for just a second, I saw something in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or satisfaction. She hurried away before I could say anything. I checked the security camera footage later that day after filing a formal complaint with IT. The timestamp showed Brenda accessing my accounts at 7:45 that morning using administrator credentials. 2 hours before my presentation, Douglas had planned this entire humiliation down to the minute. He knew exactly what he was doing. All my files were gone. 3 years of client contacts, proprietary marketing strategies, campaign data, research, everything. Without that documentation, I couldn't prove any of the work was mine. And TechVance wasn't just hiring me for my skills. They needed me to bring the relationships and strategies I'd developed. If I showed up empty-handed, would they still want me? Douglas was standing in the hallway when I left the building with my pathetic box of personal items. He was smiling. Actually smiling. "Good luck with your new position," he said. I'm sure they'll be very impressed with what you bring to the table. I had 48 hours before my official exit interview with Human Resources. 48 hours to somehow recreate 3 years of work from memory, or find another way to prove what I'd accomplished. I spent the first night at my kitchen table, trying to rebuild files and documentation. My eyes burned from staring at the computer screen. I managed to recreate some basic frameworks from memory, but the detailed client data and campaign results were impossible to reproduce without the original files. The next morning, I started calling former clients. I needed testimonials, references, anything that would verify my work. The first 3 calls went straight to voicemail. The fourth client, a woman named Sarah who ran a regional retail chain, actually answered. "Gail," she said, and her tone was cold. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "Sarah, I'm transitioning to a new position, and I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to provide a reference for the work we did together. The campaign last year increased your online sales by 41%. There was a long pause. "Douglas called me yesterday. He said you were let go for performance issues. Something about ethical violations?" My stomach dropped. "That's not true. I'm leaving for a better opportunity." He seemed pretty certain about what he was saying. "Look, Gail, I don't want to get involved in whatever is happening at your company. I'm sorry." She hung up. I called 6 more clients. 4 didn't answer. 2 gave me similar responses. Douglas had gotten to all of them first. He'd poisoned every professional relationship I'd spent years building. I reached out to my team next. The 5 people I'd mentored and protected for 2 years. I'd helped Jordan get promoted to senior analyst. I'd covered for Patricia when she missed deadlines because of her divorce. I'd trained Marcus from the ground up when he was fresh out of college. Jordan answered her phone on the 3rd ring. "Gail, I can't talk to you." "Jordan, please. I just need help recovering some of the project files. You have copies of the campaign reports we worked on together." "Douglas called a meeting with all of us yesterday afternoon," she said quietly. "He told us that if anyone helps you or communicates with you, we'll be terminated immediately. I have student loans, Gail. I can't lose this job. But you know the truth. You know I did that work. I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't help you." Patricia was worse. She'd actually given a statement to Human Resources claiming that I regularly took credit for the team's ideas and created a hostile work environment. I'd spent 6 months helping her through her custody battle, listening to her cry in my office, adjusting her workload so she could make it to court dates. Marcus wouldn't even take my call. I sat alone in my apartment that night, eating cold pizza and realizing just how thoroughly Douglas had isolated me. He hadn't just destroyed my files. He'd destroyed my reputation and turned my own team against me. People I'd trusted, people I'd helped. My phone rang at 8:30. It was Gregory Stern, the CEO of TechVance. "Gail, I wanted to touch base with you. I've been hearing some concerning rumors about your departure from your current company." I tried to keep my voice steady. "What kind of rumors?" "Just that there were some issues, performance concerns. I wanted to give you a chance to address them directly." I explained everything as calmly as I could, but I could hear how defensive I sounded, how desperate. Gregory listened without interrupting. "I see," he said when I finished. "Well, I think we need to pause the onboarding process while we get some clarity on the situation. You understand." "Pause?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Just temporarily. Until we can verify a few things. I'll be in touch." The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, feeling the walls closing in. The $900,000 offer that had felt like salvation 2 days ago was slipping away. I had 2 weeks of severance pay and no other job prospects. Every company would see me as a legal liability now. No one would touch me. The next morning, I got a certified letter. Douglas had filed a lawsuit against me personally for theft of intellectual property. He was claiming I'd planned to steal company secrets and take them to TechVance. The lawsuit was already making news in the local business community. I saw it posted on 3 different industry websites by noon. My LinkedIn messages exploded with notifications, but they weren't supportive messages. They were people removing their connections with me. Recruiters who'd contacted me the previous month were now completely silent. One person I'd worked with 5 years ago sent a brief message. "Sorry, can't be associated with this situation. I was being erased from my entire professional network in real time. Then my landlord called. My rent check had bounced. That was impossible. I had over $40,000 in my savings account. I logged into my bank account immediately. The balance showed $863. Someone had withdrawn $43,112 3 days ago, the same morning as my presentation. I called the bank's fraud department, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They opened an investigation, but the withdrawal had been authorized using my correct login credentials and security information. The transfer went to an offshore account that would take weeks to trace. They couldn't just reverse it. I'd have to wait for the investigation to conclude, which could take 60 to 90 days. I filed a police report that afternoon. The detective was sympathetic but realistic. Financial fraud investigations take time. Even if we find out who did this, getting your money back is a whole different challenge. I had $917 in my checking account. My credit cards were maxed from a kitchen renovation I'd done 2 months ago, back when I had a steady income and thought my future was secure. I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight Douglas's lawsuit. I couldn't make next month's rent, which was $2,200. And my father in Arizona needed his medication refilled. I usually sent him $500 twice a month to help with his prescriptions and living expenses. At 78 years old, his Social Security barely covered his rent. I called him that evening, trying to keep my voice normal. "Dad, I might be a little late with this month's check. I'm dealing with some work stuff." "What kind of work stuff?" His hearing wasn't great anymore, and I had to repeat myself. "Just a transition between jobs. Nothing to worry about." "Gail, you sound upset. What's really going on?" I broke down. I told him everything. He listened quietly, the way he always did. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," he said when I finished. "You stood up for yourself. That takes real courage. Don't you worry about me. I'll be fine." But he wouldn't be fine, and neither would I. 2 weeks later, I was living in my friend Sylvia's spare bedroom. Moving out of my apartment at 34 years old and asking a friend for help was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. Sylvia insisted she was happy to help, but I could see the concern in her eyes when she looked at me. I'd sold most of my furniture to cover moving costs, and the debt I owed my landlord. My car got repossessed on a Tuesday morning while I was at a job interview that went nowhere. The interviewer clearly Googled me before I arrived, because he cut the meeting short after 15 minutes. Public transportation in our city was decent, but it took 3 times longer to get anywhere. A trip that used to take 20 minutes in my car now took over an hour with 2 bus transfers. I spent my days applying to jobs and getting rejected or ignored. I had to sell my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one she'd given me before she died. The pawn shop gave me $800 for it. I cried the entire bus ride back to Sylvia's apartment. The lawsuit was moving forward. The court date was set in 30 days. Douglas's legal team was Hartford and Associates, one of the biggest corporate law firms in the state. They'd filed a motion to freeze my remaining assets pending the outcome of the case. The judge granted a partial freeze, which meant my checking account was locked. I literally had $236 in cash to my name. My professional network had completely abandoned me. Former colleagues stopped responding to emails and texts. My college roommate Madison worked in marketing at a different tech company. We'd been friends for 12 years. I sent her 3 messages over 2 weeks. She never replied. Then I saw on social media that she'd attended an industry mixer and posted photos with several people I knew, including Patricia from my old team. Someone had created an anonymous blog called The Truth About Gail Harper. It contained detailed information about my career, my projects, and my personality. But everything was twisted. It painted me as a manipulative fraud who took credit for other people's work and created toxic work environments wherever I went. The blog included just enough accurate details to seem credible. Dates of campaigns I'd worked on, names of clients, but all of it was spun to make me look terrible. The worst part was not knowing who wrote it. Someone who knew me well enough to have access to specific information about my career. Someone I'd probably trusted. The stress was destroying me physically. I started having panic attacks. The first one happened at 3 in the morning. I woke up with chest pain so severe I thought I was having a heart attack. Sylvia drove me to the emergency room, where they ran tests and determined it was anxiety. The ER bill was $2,894. I didn't have insurance anymore since I'd lost my job. The hospital sent the bill to collections within a week. My credit score, which had been 742, dropped to 518. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. Sylvia tried to get me to see a therapist, but I couldn't afford the copays even with the sliding scale clinic she found. I took a part-time job at a home goods store called Maple and Pine, minimum wage which was $13.50 an hour in our state. I worked 28 hours a week, which gave me about $280 before taxes. After taxes, I cleared around $215 weekly. It was barely enough for food and my phone bill. Standing on my feet for 8-hour shifts while dealing with demanding customers was exhausting. My manager, a woman named Donna, was nice enough, but she had no idea what I'd been through or who I used to be. To her, I was just another retail worker, who sometimes seemed distracted and sad. The court case was 2 weeks away. Douglas's lawyers had submitted hundreds of pages of evidence. There were emails I'd allegedly sent discussing stealing company data. I'd never written those emails. They were fabricated, but they looked real. They had my email address, the company's formatting, everything. My former team members had provided written testimony. Jordan, Patricia, and Marcus all claimed I was abusive and regularly took credit for their work. Reading their statements felt like being stabbed. These were people I'd mentored, people I'd celebrated birthdays with, and helped through personal crises. Douglas's lawyers had documentation of every marketing strategy I'd developed, claiming they were actually his ideas that I'd stolen. They had reports showing the progression of each campaign, with his name attached to the initial proposals. I had nothing. No files, no witnesses, no documentation. Just my word against a mountain of manufactured evidence. The court-appointed legal aid lawyer assigned to my case was a tired-looking woman named Beth, who handled about 80 cases simultaneously. She met with me for 30 minutes and told me bluntly that I was probably going to lose. They could push for criminal charges, Beth said, shuffling through papers. Corporate espionage carries a potential sentence of 6 months to 2 years in state prison. Prison. I might actually go to prison for defending myself against someone who'd abused and sabotaged me. My father called on a Wednesday evening. His voice sounded weak. "Gail, honey, I need to tell you something. I have to have surgery on my heart. The doctor says it can't wait much longer." "What kind of surgery?" I asked, though I already felt the answer forming like lead in my stomach. "A valve replacement. It's pretty serious. The cost after insurance is going to be about $30,000. I've been trying to figure out how to handle it." $30,000. I had $215. "Dad, I'll figure something out. Don't worry." "Sweetheart, I know you're dealing with your own problems right now. Your sister said she might be able to help with some of it." My sister Emily lived in Seattle with her husband and 3 kids. She was a teacher. She didn't have that kind of money either. "Let me see what I can do," I said, knowing there was nothing I could do. After we hung up, I sat on Sylvia's couch and cried for an hour. Deep, ugly crying that left my eyes swollen and my chest aching. My father was one of the best people I knew. He'd raised Emily and me alone after our mother died when I was 9. He worked 2 jobs to put us through college. He'd never asked me for anything. And now, when he needed help, I was completely powerless. I was 10 weeks pregnant. I'd found out a week earlier. I'd been feeling nauseous and exhausted, which I'd attributed to stress. But when I missed my period, I bought a test at the dollar store. I'd been casually dating a man named Brian for 4 months. He was a decent guy, a sales manager at a pharmaceutical company. We had fun together, but we weren't serious. We'd been careful, but clearly not careful enough. I told him over coffee, at a diner near his apartment. He stared at me for a long time without saying anything. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. I took 3 tests. "What are you going to do?" The way he said "you," instead of "we," told me everything I needed to know. "I'm not sure yet," I said honestly. "I wanted to tell you before I made any decisions." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Gail, I'm not ready to be a father. I mean, We barely know each other. And with everything you're dealing with right now, this seems like really bad timing. I know. I can help financially with whatever decision you make, he said carefully. But I need to be honest with you. I don't want a kid right now. I don't think I want to be involved in that way. I nodded. I'd expected this, but it still hurt. He called me twice after that conversation, both times to make sure I understood he wasn't interested in being a father. Then he stopped calling altogether. I made an appointment at a clinic to discuss my options. I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours, filling out paperwork and watching other women come and go. Some looked relieved. Some looked devastated. Some looked completely blank. When they called my name, I couldn't stand up. I sat there for another 5 minutes while the receptionist called my name 2 more times. Then I grabbed my bag and left. I couldn't do it. Even with everything falling apart, even with no money and no job and no future I could see clearly, I couldn't walk through that door. The decision wasn't about logic or good timing. It was about something deeper than that. I was going to have this baby, which meant everything was about to get even harder. Single motherhood with no stable income and a potential prison sentence hanging over my head. The smart choice would have been to make a different decision, but I couldn't. At work the next day, I was restocking shelves in the bedding section when a customer approached me. She was an older woman, probably in her early 60s, with short gray hair and kind eyes. "Excuse me, do you have these sheets in ivory?" I turned around and froze. It was Charlotte Reeves. She'd been a senior vice president at my old company until she left 6 months ago. I'd admired her from a distance, but we'd never worked directly together. She recognized me at the same moment I recognized her. Her eyes widened. "Gail? Gail Harper?" "Hi, Charlotte." I felt my face burning with humiliation. "What are you doing here?" She looked genuinely shocked. "Working," I said simply. "Do you need help finding those sheets?" "Come outside with me," she said. "Please, on your break." I told Donna I was taking my 15-minute break and followed Charlotte to the parking lot. We sat in her car, a practical sedan that probably cost more than I'd make in a year at my current job. "Tell me what happened," Charlotte said. So I did. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker as I spoke. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He did the same thing to me." "What?" "Douglas Pritchard. 6 months ago, I disagreed with him about a major client strategy. He wanted to cut corners on a campaign, reduce the budget, and pocket the difference. I told him it was unethical and I was going to report it to the board. 2 weeks later, I was being forced out for supposed performance issues. Why didn't you fight it?" Charlotte laughed bitterly. "I tried. He destroyed my reputation just like he's doing to yours. Turned my team against me. Manufactured evidence of mistakes I never made. I was exhausted, Gail. I had enough savings to just walk away. So I did. I signed an NDA and took a settlement. Now I run a small consulting business. Nothing like what I had before. Did you keep any evidence?" She looked at me carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Because I'm being sued. I'm probably going to lose everything and maybe go to prison. If you have proof that Douglas has a pattern of doing this, it might help my case." Charlotte pulled out her phone. She opened an encrypted folder and showed me the screen. There were dozens of files, emails, audio recordings from meetings, text messages, documentation spanning years. "I kept everything," she said, "because I knew he'd do this to someone else eventually. He's done it before. At least 4 other people over 7 years that I know about. Maybe more. Will you testify? Will you give this to my lawyer?" Her expression changed. The kindness in her eyes shifted to fear. "I can't. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. If I violate it, I'll face a lawsuit myself. I'm barely making it financially as it is. I can't risk it. But this could save me. This could stop him from doing it to other people." "I know," she said softly. "I'm sorry, Gail. I really am. I'll give you copies of everything I have, but I can't testify. I can't appear in court. Without my testimony, I don't know if the evidence will even be admissible." She transferred the files to my phone right there in the parking lot. Hundreds of documents proving Douglas's pattern of abuse and manipulation. It was more than I dared to hope for. "Thank you," I said. This might be enough. That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning reviewing Charlotte's files. They were devastating. Clear proof of Douglas's tactics. But without her testimony, would they be enough? I fell asleep on Sylvia's couch with my phone in my hand. I woke up to my phone buzzing. It was Charlotte. Her text message made my blood run cold. My house was broken into last night. Nothing stolen except my computer files. All my backup drives are gone. Someone knew we met. Be careful. I checked my laptop immediately. The files Charlotte had sent me were gone. Deleted. My phone had been hacked remotely. Everything was erased. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen us talking in that parking lot, and now the only evidence that could save me had been destroyed. I had 5 days until the court hearing. No evidence, no witnesses willing to testify, no money for a real lawyer, and I was 12 weeks pregnant with morning sickness that made every day a struggle. I'd been working at Maple and Pine for 3 weeks. Standing on my feet for 8 hours while nauseous and exhausted was brutal. I'd throw up in the bathroom during my breaks, rinse my mouth, and go back to helping customers choose throw pillows and picture frames. I applied to 63 jobs in 2 weeks. Marketing positions, communications roles, anything remotely related to my skills. I got exactly 0 responses. The lawsuit had made me radioactive in the industry. Even positions I was overqualified for wouldn't give me a call back. My phone bill was due in 2 days. If I paid it, I'd have $73 left. If I didn't pay it, I'd lose my number and my only connection to potential employers and the court system. I paid the bill. The legal aid lawyer, Beth, called to go over my case one final time. Her assessment was grim. Douglas's team has hundreds of pages of evidence, emails with your name on them, testimony from multiple former coworkers, documentation of the strategies he claims you stole. You have nothing to counter with except your word. The judge isn't going to find in your favor based solely on your testimony. So I'm going to lose. Almost certainly. And given the severity of the accusations, there's a real possibility of criminal charges. Corporate espionage. Theft of trade secrets. You're looking at a potential sentence of 6 months to 2 years in state prison. Prison. While pregnant. I'd have my baby in prison. The thought made me physically ill. What are my options? Pray for a miracle, Beth said. She didn't sound like she was joking. My father called that evening. His voice was weaker than the last time we'd talked. They scheduled my surgery for next month. The doctor says we can't wait any longer. How are you feeling, Dad? Tired. But I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you, sweetheart. Your sister told me more about what's happening, about the lawsuit and everything. Emily had a big mouth. I'd asked her not to worry Dad with the details. I'm handling it, I lead. You shouldn't have to handle it alone. I wish I could help you. I wish I had money to give you. Dad, please don't worry about money. Just focus on getting through the surgery. I'm proud of you, Gail. No matter what happens in that courtroom, you stood up for yourself. You didn't let them break you. But they had broken me. I was broken into so many pieces I didn't know how to put myself back together. After we hung up, I sat in Sylvia's bathroom with my hand on my stomach. I wasn't showing yet, but I knew the baby was there. A tiny life depending on me to figure this out, to somehow survive this disaster. I'd decided to keep the baby. That decision was made. But I had no idea how I was going to provide for a child. No job prospects. Minimum wage work that wouldn't cover childcare costs. A criminal record in my near future. What kind of life could I offer this baby? The morning sickness was constant now, not just in the mornings but all day long. The smell of coffee made me nauseous. The sight of raw chicken in the grocery store made me run to the bathroom. I'd lost 14 pounds instead of gaining weight. Sylvia worried about me constantly. You need to see a doctor, she said one morning while I was throwing up in the bathroom. I don't have insurance. There are free clinics. I'll go when I can. Right now I need to focus on not going to prison. The stress was destroying me. I couldn't sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night. My hair was falling out in the shower. I had dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't hide. At 26 years old, I looked 40. I was working my shift at Maple and Pine on a Thursday afternoon when a woman came into the store. She was browsing the kitchen section, looking at mixing bowls. I was supposed to approach customers and offer help, but I was so tired I just stood there watching her. She turned around and our eyes met. It was Charlotte Reeves again. My heart started pounding. Had she come to warn me about something? To tell me Douglas had done something else? "Gail," she said quietly. "Can we talk?" We went to the parking lot again. This time we sat on a bench outside the store. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Charlotte said. "About the files that got stolen. About what happened to you. Okay, I can't testify. I legally can't. But I know someone who might be able to help you. Have you talked to any of Douglas's other victims?" "Other victims?" "The 4 people I mentioned. The ones he did this to before us. One of them might be willing to talk. Her name is Pauline Winters. She works in Seattle now. Completely different industry. He destroyed her tech career 5 years ago." Charlotte gave me Pauline's contact information. I called her that night from Sylvia's apartment. Pauline answered on the second ring. She listened to my story without interrupting. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "That sounds exactly like what he did to me," she finally said. "Down to the manufactured emails and turning my team against me. I lost everything. My career, my savings, my marriage fell apart from the stress. It took me 3 years to rebuild my life. Would you be willing to testify? To help prove there's a pattern?" "I don't know," Pauline said slowly. "I moved on from all that. I don't want to revisit it. But let me think about it. Let me talk to my therapist and my partner. Can I call you back tomorrow?" "Yes, please. You might be my only chance." She called back the next evening. "I'll do it. I'll testify. And I know someone else who might too. A man named Derek who Douglas destroyed 3 years ago. Let me reach out to him." For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Over the next 2 days, Pauline connected me with Derek and another woman named Stacy. All 3 had been victims of Douglas's systematic abuse and sabotage. All 3 had left the industry entirely. All 3 were willing to testify. But would it be enough? Their experiences were years old. Douglas's lawyers could argue that circumstances were different now, that these were disgruntled former employees with their own agendas. I needed more. I needed someone from my actual team, someone who knew exactly what Douglas had done this time. On Friday night, 48 hours before the court hearing, I got an email. The sender address was encrypted. The subject line read, "I'm sorry. I can't stay silent anymore." I opened it with shaking hands. "Gail, this is Jordan. I've been losing sleep for weeks over what I did to you, what we all did to you. Douglas promised me a promotion if I helped him get rid of you. He told me you were stealing credit for teamwork and that you were planning to take proprietary information to a competitor. He made it sound like we were protecting the company. But after you left, he turned on me. He's making me work 70 to 80-hour weeks. He belittles me in front of clients. He takes credit for everything I do. Last week, he made me cry in a meeting by telling me I was incompetent and lucky to still have a job. I realized he's going to do to me exactly what he did to you. I'm going to be his next victim, and I helped him destroy you. I can't live with that." I kept copies of everything. Screenshots of texts where Douglas told us exactly what to say to HR about you. Recordings of meetings where he bragged about getting rid of ambitious women before they threatened him. Emails where he coordinated the whole setup. I'll testify. I'll give you everything I have. But I need protection. I need some kind of guarantee that he can't destroy me the way he destroyed you. I need witness immunity, or a protection clause or something. I'm terrified, Gail, but I can't stay silent anymore. The email included dozens of attachments. Screenshots, audio files, email chains. Everything Douglas had done laid out in perfect detail. I called Beth, the legal aid lawyer, immediately. She didn't answer. I left 3 voicemails. She finally called back at 11 at night. "I have evidence," I said. "Real evidence. A witness who will testify and documentation proving everything. Send it to me right now." I forwarded Jordan's email. Beth was silent for several minutes while she reviewed the files. "This changes everything," she finally said. "This is exactly what we needed. But your friend is right. She needs protection. Let me make some calls." Beth called me back at 1 in the morning. I contacted a friend at a civil rights law firm, Ruth Feldman. She's interested in taking your case pro bono. This isn't just about you anymore, Gail. This is about establishing legal precedent for workplace retaliation and gender discrimination. Ruth wants to file a countersuit against Douglas and the company. Can she protect Jordan? She's working on it. She'll have something in place by Monday morning. I spent the weekend in a haze of fear and hope. Ruth Feldman called on Sunday evening. She was sharp and direct. I've reviewed everything. Jordan will have full witness protection and legal immunity for her cooperation. We're filing a countersuit tomorrow morning for gender discrimination, hostile work environment retaliation, and conspiracy. We're also requesting an emergency hearing to dismiss Douglas's suit against you. What happens now? Now we fight. And Gail, we're going to win. Monday morning arrived with breaking news. TechWatch Daily, a major tech industry news site, published an exposé written by a journalist named Hannah Frost. The headline read, "Pattern of Abuse: How One Tech Manager Destroyed Multiple Careers." The article detailed Douglas's behavior spanning his entire career. Hannah had interviewed 9 of his victims, including Charlotte, Pauline, Derek, and Stacy. She'd somehow gotten access to HR complaints that had been buried by the company. She'd documented a clear pattern of targeting successful women, stealing their work, and destroying their careers when they pushed back. The article went viral within hours. It was shared thousands of times across social media. Business journalists from major publications started reaching out to me for interviews. By noon, my old company's stock had dropped 12% in pre-market trading. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Several major clients issued statements expressing concern and threatening to review their contracts. I was getting ready for court, trying to find something professional to wear from my limited wardrobe, when my phone rang. It was Gregory Stern from TechVance. "Gail, I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you instead of listening to rumors. I've followed this entire case through the news, and I'm appalled by what happened to you. Thank you for saying that. TechVance wants to revive our offer to you, Vice President of Digital Strategy, $900,000. The position is yours if you still want it. But more than that, we want to help you fight this case. We'll cover all your legal costs to see it through to verdict. We'll pay you a $50,000 advance immediately. And we'll guarantee you the position regardless of how the case turns out." I couldn't speak for a moment. Tears were streaming down my face. "Why would you do that?" I finally managed to ask. "Because what Douglas did is everything we stand against. We want this case to proceed publicly. We want it to set a precedent that protects other people from this kind of abuse. We want you to fight, Gail. And we want to support you while you do it." "I accept," I said. "All of it. Thank you." The $50,000 hit my bank account within 2 hours. I immediately sent $30,000 to my father for his surgery. The relief of being able to help him was overwhelming. Ruth called as I was leaving for the courthouse. "The company's lawyers reached out this morning. They want to settle. They'll drop all claims against you, reinstate you with back pay, and offer a $75,000 settlement in exchange for a confidentiality agreement." "What does that mean?" "It means you can't discuss what happened publicly. The case gets buried. Douglas gets protected. It happens quietly and disappears. And if I refuse, we go to trial. We fight for full vindication and set legal precedent. But trials are unpredictable. Judges and juries can be hard to predict. The settlement gives you guaranteed money and resolution right now." I thought about Charlotte, forced into silence by her NDA. I thought about all the other victims who'd been paid to stay quiet. I thought about the next woman Douglas would target if this pattern was allowed to continue. "I'm refusing the settlement. We're going to trial." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. That's what I was hoping you'd say." I met Ruth at the courthouse at 1 in the afternoon. She was in her late 40s with gray-streaked dark hair and sharp eyes. Jordan was already there, looking terrified but determined. Pauline, Derek, and Stacy had flown in to testify. Douglas arrived with his legal team from Hartford and Associates, 4 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked confident, almost smug. Then he saw the crowd in the gallery, journalists, former employees, industry leaders. His expression changed. Judge Elizabeth Sutherland entered the courtroom. She was known for running a tight court and having no patience for nonsense. Ruth presented our evidence methodically. She played audio recordings where Douglas explicitly discussed manipulating and destroying his subordinates. She showed the text messages where he coordinated my setup. She presented timeline documentation, proving his pattern of behavior across years. Jordan testified first. She was shaking when she took the stand, but her voice was clear. Douglas told me exactly what to say to HR about Gail. He showed me the false performance reviews he'd created. He promised me her position if I helped him force her out. He said women like Gail needed to be put in their place before they got too confident. She played the audio recording she'd kept on her phone. Douglas's voice was unmistakable. These ambitious women think they can just waltz in and take over. You have to cut them down early, make them doubt themselves, turn their teams against them. Then they leave on their own and you don't have to deal with lawsuits. The courtroom was completely silent. Pauline testified about what Douglas had done to her 5 years earlier. Derek described his experience from 3 years ago. Stacy explained how she'd been forced to quit after Douglas made her work environment unbearable. The pattern was undeniable. Douglas's lawyers tried to discredit the witnesses. They claimed the evidence was fabricated. They argued that these were disgruntled former employees coordinating false accusations. But Ruth had forensic analysis confirming the audio recordings were authentic. She had email metadata proving the messages hadn't been doctored. The timeline was backed up by HR records and performance reviews that contradicted Douglas's claims. Then Douglas took the stand. He was arrogant and dismissive. He claimed all these women were simply bad at their jobs, that he'd been trying to manage them effectively and they'd turned it into discrimination claims. Ruth's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Pritchard, in the audio recording we heard earlier, you said women need to be put in their place. Can you explain what you meant by that? That's taken out of context. What context makes that statement appropriate? I meant that any employee who becomes insubordinate needs to be managed. But you specifically said women. You said ambitious women think they can waltz in and take over. Why did you specify women? I don't recall saying that specifically. We all just heard the recording. Would you like us to play it again? Douglas's face flushed red. He started getting defensive. Ruth caught him in 3 direct lies within 10 minutes. She had documentation proving he'd falsified emails. She had witness testimony contradicting his version of events. He lost his temper. These women were incompetent. They couldn't handle the pressure of real business. I was trying to protect the company from their mistakes. By sabotaging their work? By deleting their files? By turning their teams against them? They were stealing company resources. They were planning to take proprietary information to competitors. Do you have any evidence of that? Everyone knows it's true. Everyone knows? Or you told everyone it was true? Douglas actually stood up from the witness chair, his face purple with rage. I'm not going to sit here and be interrogated by some lawyer who doesn't understand how business works. These women didn't deserve their positions. They were diversity hires who couldn't cut it. Judge Sutherland slammed her gavel. Mr. Pritchard, sit down and control yourself immediately or I'll hold you in contempt. Douglas sat, but the damage was done. He'd revealed exactly who he was in front of everyone. During the lunch recess, the company's lawyers approached Ruth again. Our client would like to settle. Immediately. We'll drop all claims against Miss Harper. Full reinstatement with back pay. $150,000 settlement. Still with the confidentiality clause? Ruth asked. Yes. Ruth looked at me. It's your decision, Gail. I shook my head. No. We finished this. The lawyers looked panicked. We could go as high as $200,000. Not interested. They went back to their client. I could see Douglas arguing with them, his face still red. The afternoon session continued. Ruth brought in expert witnesses on workplace discrimination and retaliation. She had a forensic accountant who'd traced the theft of my $43,000 back to an offshore account connected to Douglas's assistant Brenda. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Sutherland dismissed Douglas's lawsuit against me at the end of the day. She called it frivolous and retaliatory. She ordered him to pay my legal fees. But more than that, she made an unexpected announcement. I'm referring this case to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation. The evidence presented suggests Mr. Pritchard may have committed wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. This goes beyond civil litigation. She set a trial date for the full damages hearing in 30 days. As we left the courthouse, federal investigators were waiting on the steps. They arrested Douglas right there in front of everyone. The charges included wire fraud related to the theft of my bank funds and identity theft for accessing my accounts without authorization. The news cameras captured everything. Douglas being led away in handcuffs, his expensive lawyers scrambling to keep up. His face was pale now instead of red. It was the lead story on every business news channel that evening. I sat in Sylvia's apartment watching the coverage, my hand on my stomach where my baby was growing. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of activity. TechVance kept their promise. I started as Vice President of Digital Strategy with a flexible schedule that accommodated my pregnancy. They gave me a team of 12 people and the budget to implement real change. My first major project was developing ethical workplace culture guidelines for the entire company. Gregory wanted TechVance to be a leader in employee protection and accountability. He asked me to create policies that would prevent what happened to me from happening to anyone else in the industry. I became a spokesperson without meaning to. Forbes called for an interview, then Fortune, then the Wall Street Journal. They all wanted to know about my experience and what it meant for corporate culture in tech. Speaking invitations came from conferences across the country. I was invited to keynote at 3 major industry events. Organizations that had ignored me months earlier now wanted me to share my story. The criminal trial happened first. Douglas was found guilty on 3 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of identity theft. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison. His lawyers immediately filed appeals, but the evidence was too strong. His wife filed for divorce while he was awaiting sentencing. She took their 2 kids and moved back to her parents' house in another state. Douglas's entire life imploded in the span of 8 weeks. The civil trial for damages took place on a cold morning in early February. I was 28 weeks pregnant by then, visibly showing. I wore a navy maternity dress that Sylvia helped me pick out. Ruth presented our case over 3 days. She showed the documented harm to my career, my reputation, and my mental health. She had expert testimony about the long-term effects of workplace retaliation and gender discrimination. She presented evidence of Douglas's pattern of behavior affecting at least 9 other victims over 7 years. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They awarded me $2.3 million in damages, $1 million for actual damages to my career and reputation, $1.3 million in punitive damages to send a message that this behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The company and Douglas were held jointly liable. The company paid immediately to avoid further negative publicity. Douglas filed for bankruptcy, but the criminal restitution order meant he'd be paying me back for years, even after his release from prison. The money changed everything. I paid off every debt immediately. I sent $50,000 to my father for his medical care and future expenses. He'd had his surgery successfully and was recovering well. I bought a small 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with a yard and good schools. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine. The mortgage payment was less than what I'd been paying in rent for my old apartment. I set up a college fund for my baby. I invested the remainder conservatively. For the first time in my life, I had real financial security. My daughter was born on a sunny morning in April. 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Perfectly healthy. I named her Charlotte, after the woman whose courage in sharing her evidence had helped save me. Brian had reappeared during my pregnancy after seeing all the news coverage. He suddenly wanted to be involved. I let him meet Charlotte in the hospital with clear boundaries. He could have supervised visits and paid child support, but I wasn't interested in a relationship or co-parenting partnership. He agreed, though I suspected he'd disappear again once the novelty wore off. I was prepared to raise Charlotte alone if necessary. Sylvia was her godmother. She was in the delivery room with me, holding my hand through 14 hours of labor. She cried when Charlotte was born. Jordan had left the company and found a new job with my help. She called me every few weeks to check in. She was in therapy, working through her guilt and trauma. Our relationship would never be what it was before, but I understood why she'd done what she'd done. Douglas was skilled at manipulation. She'd been one of his victims, too. The 8 other victims Douglas had destroyed formed a support group. We met monthly, sometimes in person and sometimes virtually. 2 of them had written a book about corporate abuse patterns and toxic leadership. It became a bestseller and led to policy changes at several major companies. My old company underwent massive transformation. Douglas was gone. 3 board members who'd enabled his behavior were forced to resign. They hired a new CEO, a woman named Dorothy Chambers, who'd previously turned around 2 struggling tech companies. Dorothy implemented a complete culture overhaul. Independent ethics hotline, mandatory management training, zero-tolerance policies for discrimination and retaliation. The company's stock recovered and reached new highs within 6 months. TechWatch Daily won a journalism award for Hannah Frost's exposé. The investigation had expanded beyond just my case to document widespread problems in the tech industry. Several other executives at different companies were forced out after similar patterns of abuse were uncovered. New legislation was introduced in our state to strengthen whistleblower protections and increase penalties for workplace retaliation. I testified before the state legislative committee. 2 senators cited my case specifically when arguing for the bill's passage. It became law 8 months after my testimony. At TechVance, I built a team I was proud of. I mentored 3 young women in their careers. I implemented transparent promotion processes and regular feedback systems. I created an environment where people felt safe, speaking up about problems. My first major campaign for TechVance increased their market share by 18%. Gregory gave me additional stock options and expanded my team. I was making real contributions and being recognized for them. Charlotte was 6 months old when I received an invitation to speak at a major women in tech conference. 5,000 attendees. The keynote address. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me, especially about something so personal. But I thought about all the women who'd reached out to me after my story went public. The ones who said I'd given them courage to report their own abusive managers. The ones who said seeing me fight back had inspired them to stand up for themselves. I accepted the invitation. Standing on that stage, looking out at 5,000 faces, I told my story. I talked about the moment Douglas yanked that cable. About feeling utterly destroyed and hopeless. About being terrified and alone. About wanting to give up. And I talked about fighting back. About refusing to be silenced. About the other victims who came forward. About Jordan finding her conscience. About Ruth fighting for justice. The audience gave me a standing ovation that lasted 4 minutes. Afterward, dozens of women lined up to talk to me. They shared their own stories. They thanked me for being brave enough to speak up. I realized this was bigger than just my personal victory. This was about changing a culture that allowed people like Douglas to thrive. This was about protecting the next generation of women in the workplace. 8 months after the trial, I got an email from a woman I didn't know. She worked at a different tech company. Her manager was exhibiting the same patterns Douglas had. She'd seen my story and knew she needed to act before it escalated. She asked for advice. I spent 2 hours on the phone with her, walking her through how to document everything, how to protect herself, how to find support. I connected her with Ruth's law firm. She filed a complaint. Her company investigated and fired the manager within 3 weeks. She kept her job and got promoted 6 months later. That's when I understood the real impact of what we'd done. We hadn't just stopped Douglas. We'd created a roadmap for other people facing similar abuse. We'd shown that fighting back was possible. I think about that terrible day in the conference room often. The humiliation of having the cable yanked from my laptop. The fear of losing everything. The months of struggling and barely surviving. But I also think about what that moment led to. It forced me to become someone I didn't know I could be. Someone strong enough to stand alone when everyone abandoned me. Someone brave enough to refuse silence, even when it would have been easier. Being destroyed gave me nothing left to lose, which gave me everything I needed to win. I was comfortable in my old job, accepting bad treatment as normal. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that I could handle it, that speaking up would only make things worse. But sometimes the worst things that happen to us force us to become who we're meant to be. My life now is nothing like I imagined it would be a year ago. It's better. I have a daughter I love more than anything. I have a career where I'm valued and respected. I have financial security. I have a platform to help other people. And I have my voice. They tried to take that from me. They tried to make me disappear quietly. They tried to destroy me so thoroughly that I'd never be able to fight back. But I learned something important through all of this. Your reputation isn't what people say about you in the moment. It's what you prove yourself to be over time. Being silenced would have been the real defeat. Every day I stayed quiet would have been another victory for Douglas and everyone like him. Standing up for myself saved not just my own career. It protected future victims from Douglas's abuse. It helped other women find their own courage to speak up. Justice takes courage. It takes sacrifice. It takes being willing to risk everything for what's right. But it's worth it. Every single time. I sit in my office now, on the 20th floor with windows overlooking the city, and I think about that woman working retail while pregnant and terrified. The woman who had $73 to her name and thought her life was over. She saved herself by refusing to stay silent, and in doing so, she saved others too. That's the victory that matters. Not just the money or the job or the vindication, but knowing that speaking up made a real difference. They can take your job, they can take your money, they can even take your reputation for a while, but they can't take your truth. And when you speak it, when you refuse to be silenced no matter what it costs, that's when you discover what you're really made of. That's when you win. Not just for yourself, for everyone who comes after you. And that victory is forever. Have you ever faced a situation at work where you knew something was wrong but were afraid to speak up? What would you do if you found yourself in a similar position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories about overcoming workplace injustice, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and remember that your voice matters more than your fear. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.